My name is Dr. Ravi Kasi. Thank you and welcome to our Road to Residency program. This is our second year doing this, and this is our first of four of these types of meetings. The purpose is to provide all the medical students with up-to-date information about what is happening for you all in terms of your application process, with the hope that you all successfully match in 2025. I'm going to introduce the other speakers here from the attendings. Sarah, do you want to introduce yourself and let everyone know who you are?
Sure. I'm Dr. Sarah Eichmeyer. I'm at University of Kansas, and I have been in medical education for a long time. So it's really great to talk to you all tonight.
And then Maya.
Hi, I'm Maya Theritil, Drexel University School of Medicine, Pathway Director for PM&R there. And for the past 10 years have been advising them basically how to get into residencies.
Wonderful. Thank you. Amazing attendings. Eric, do you want to introduce all the residents?
Yeah, of course. Hey, everyone. I'm Eric Jones. I'm a PGY2 at Mount Sinai. Did my medical school in California at California North State University. I'm also on the AAP RFC, so it's great to see a lot of you here. And look forward to speaking with you all tonight. Next, we can have Sarang introduce himself.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm Sarang Singh. I'm a PGY3 over at Rutgers, PM&R, and Kessler Institute of Rehab. I did my medical school in Buffalo, New York, and I'm also on the RFC with Eric as well, serving as your medical student affairs rep.
All right, Rachel.
Hi, everybody. I'm also a PGY3 at Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School / Kessler. I'm not on the AAP committee, though. That's the difference there. But I'm also one of our chief residents along with Sarang this year. So excited to talk to everybody about your upcoming applications.
Nineo.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nineo Matekole. I am currently a PGY2 at Schwab Rehabilitation Hospital, affiliated with the University of Chicago. I did my undergrad at the University at Buffalo and also my medical school there. I'm from Long Island, New York. And nice to meet you all tonight.
And Deep.
Hey y'all, I'm Steve, the other outlier here. I'm currently in MS4 at Rutgers, and I have just recently matched at Northwestern Shirley Ryan. And I was just in your shoes a little while ago, so please ask any questions you guys have.
Awesome. Is that everyone, Eric?
Yep, that's everyone.
Wonderful. All right, so let's get to the nitty gritty. It is 7:04. We plan to get done at 8 o'clock sharp. What we're going to do is we're going to go back and forth, me and Eric asking questions. If I ask a question, then we're hoping the attending start first. And then, of course, if Eric asks a question, the residents will go first, but it'll be a free-flowing discussion. The chat will be live. So all of the participants, in terms of our speakers, will be answering questions on the chat. So feel free to add in any questions you have in the chat. And then at the very end, we will grab all the information from the chat and we will post it in the AAP. Of course, nothing could be done without Amy. We'll definitely want to give her the kudos in the beginning and the end. So Amy's so an integral part. So please thank you, Amy, for all the help and support for this program. All right, question number 1. My school doesn't allow me to apply for a visiting elective until May 1st. What advice would you give in regards to being able to apply in a timely manner? Anything else that I should do while I wait? And what are my chances for getting elective? I know there's a lot of questions in that one question. Dr. Theritil or Dr. Eckmeyer? Eckmeyer, excuse me.
There was a lot of questions. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Of course. I think the premise of the question is that, you know, their school doesn't allow them to apply for visiting electives until May 1st. And there seems to be a lot of nervousness around, what do I do until May 1st? Should I reach out to schools? Am I at a disadvantage if I apply to 10 schools? What are the chances that I do get an elective? What is the strategy around getting an away elective?
Gotcha. Yeah, so yeah, it is challenging. I think, you know, one of the things you could do is if you're in a city or a region that has a PM&R department, you can always reach out to faculty or some of the coordinators in those departments as a place to just at least make an initial contact for maybe some shadowing or even just a discussion or a phone call, just as a place to get started if you don't have anybody at your school.
So I can tell you from experience in our school, I've had students apply even late. You might not get probably your first choice of your away electives and your choice for, you know, what your slot is. But ultimately, over the past 10 years, I have to say that other than maybe one time or two times, most of the students have been able to get into at least their first three choices of electives that they've done by actually sometimes directly getting to the people, the programs that they wanted to go to. Sometimes there are people who cancel their rotations, and it's a possibility that they could get into rotations that way as well.
Resident group, any thoughts?
I would just like to chime in really quickly. Specifically, if you're applying late, I think the best thing you could do is actually reaching out to the programs early, just talking about your situation. And sometimes they do give grace and they'll watch out for you. You know, other medical schools finish their third year early and then you finish later, so you wouldn't have the opportunity. But I think, you know, you being proactive and definitely reaching out to the program coordinators and or program director can help you in these cases. So I definitely would recommend that.
I don't think I have anything else to add. I think our next question is actually a pretty good segue going off of what Neneo said. So our next question said, so we reach out to program coordinators or program directors if we are interested in an away rotation at a program. And I guess this would be more assuming after the VSAS application. But yeah, any thoughts from any of our residents or faculty?
I think it's hard to say that there's an absolute correct answer, but I would probably say to coordinators, just because faculty you would assume is probably busy right now with the education, and coordinators are kind of expecting to get emails from medical students anyways, so it's part of their their algorithm and their duties. You can always feel free to CC program directors to any emails sent to coordinators as well, just to keep things within their radar, but that's probably the way I would approach it.
I agree. I'm just going to second on that. And then also just be careful about kind of follow-up or persistent communication. Just know that, again, like Sarang said, program directors are going to be very busy going through applications and things. So just being mindful of that in their time. They may not get back to you, but hopefully the coordinator at least then will.
I would emphasize, if you're going to send an email, really pick your top 4 or 5. And if you're sending an email, be very specific but succinct on the importance of that program. You know, we're going to be talking about signaling and geographic preference later on down the year. So it's nice for you to state, you know what, my loved ones and I grew up in this town outside of this city. I want to move back here. And you just put in a, you know, humble brag. I just invented a device that does something amazing, you know, something to capture their attention. They might say, you know what, great, we'll keep you in mind and we'll, you know, I'll tell the program director about you. So be specific, be memorable, but of course, as you said, there's an etiquette, so just being respectful. But don't do it to every program because, you know, people are going to see right through this copied email. Okay, so this is an attending question, or anyone can answer, but back to the attendings. In the VLSO, some programs are asking for a personal statement. What are programs really looking for when reading a personal statement that might inspire you to give a person a audition elective?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's similar to the personal statement ultimately that you're gonna write in your ARIS application. It's really, you know, who you are and why PM&R. And that's really what all programs want to know. I think that, something that, you know, trying to figure out something unique, something that stands out, and also just being aware that, a lot of people have like similar backgrounds and interests that come into PM&R, and you don't want to just kind of be one of the same story, or, you know, you want to have something that kind of stands out a little bit. So if you have something interesting and unique in your situation, or your background, or why you came to PM&R, you know, I would try to highlight that. I think that tends to stand out more than kind of just the, you know, the standard cookie cutter, kind of personal statement.
And again, like Dr. Kasi was saying, you probably also want to say, in that personal statement, if you're making it specifically for the place that you're going, why you want to go to that place, and make it interesting. They don't want to hear you repeating to them what they have on their website, as well as they don't want to hear also how great a PM&R physician is, or how great the specialty is. When you say a personal statement, keep it very personal about yourself and not too wide, because I think that takes off the emphasis of being on you.
Wonderful. Any residents that had some unique personal statements that they wrote?
At least for my residency application, what I really tried to highlight in my personal statement was something that wasn't elsewhere on my CV. And honestly, something either I wanted to talk about or wanted to cover and not have to talk about as much as interviews, so I could focus on more of the items on my CV that I wanted to engage with the interviewer during that time. So really using it as an opportunity, as a supplement for the rest of your application, and trying to highlight something that's maybe not mentioned elsewhere that you want to incorporate.
All right. We definitely agree with all of that, especially kind of why you want to go to that program and, you know, making it unique if possible. All right, I think we can move on to our next question. This one might be a little more geared towards program directors, but I think I can take a little stab at it as well. So is it true that programs will remember if you are offered and then decline an away rotation at their institution? Will they hold that against you? Or is it just if you fully accept it after the offer and proceed to cancel or withdraw from it later on? You know, I'll let our program directors here kind of tackle it more in depth, but you know, I think that in general in PM&R, we understand that the process and that, you know, you apply to many programs, and obviously we can't accept every single, you know, acceptance that you get. And so I think it's certainly understandable, but I think the second question of, you know, accepting it and then turning out to decline it later on, I don't think that would be looked as well upon, but I'll let some of our faculty answer that question.
So I'm not a program director, but I can say it from a human view. I don't think anyone's going to be vindictive about you an acceptance, but that also depends on the way that you decline it. If you had accepted something and then decline it, like right before your rotation starts, that would definitely be a strikeout. But otherwise, I have this question asked to me by students every year, and all my students have had to decline some of the rotations that they've asked for, and they have actually even matched into those programs, as well as got interviews in those programs very early on.
What I would, oh, go ahead, Caitlin.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say, this is a good example of a time to remember that when you interact with a program, everybody that you interact with is very important. So your emails, your conduct with the program coordinator is extremely important. You have to be very polite and professional at all times. And so canceling something at the last minute is probably not a great way to go, because, you know, that program coordinator will definitely have to do extra work and try to find somebody to fill the spot, especially if it's last minute. And so I think it's just, it's just being respectful of other people's time and opportunities. Because you don't want to, be the reason that somebody else didn't get that spot, right? So.
What I would tell you is, program directors, just like anyone else in the world, are human beings. Some people are just petty. I personally just don't have the time to write down the people that cancel the last minute, out of sight, out of mind. But there are people that will write it down and then say we're not going to give them an interview. That's just the nature of the beast. So just be thoughtful and mindful of it. If you really like a program and you had to cancel, just be specific. Like, hey, I just can't make it work in my schedule because my med school won't let me do it, whatever it might be. And so don't let that deter you from applying to that program if it's really important to you. But then again, if it's a very important program to you, you should probably go do the audition elective. But don't overthink that. Try your best, trust your judgment, just be as respectful as possible. I think there's one more question that we can ask that was in the chat to the program directors, and that was, how many programs, or to everyone, of course, how many programs should they apply to, audition rotations? Oh, so let's do this. How many programs should they apply to, and then how many auditions should they do?
So I can tell you for my med school, what we do is tell our students to do their first rotation actually in our own PM&R elective, so that you are actually getting a good foundation of what it is to be in a PM&R rotation. So you actually get an edge when you're going to do your audition rotations. You are now not a novice of PM&R. You actually know something when you go there, and you can show how good you are. But I advise people only to do 2 audition rotations, not more than that. Students want to do 3 and 4, and actually in our curriculum, it's allowed for them to do that. But the whole idea of being a 4th-year medical student is to be a good overall medical student. If you're going to use all your 4th-year time to do just PM&R rotations, that would not be a good idea. You have 3 more years of your life and then the whole rest of your life to learn everything that you want in PM&R. So select 2.
Yeah, I would agree. I advise my students that I think 1 or 2 audition rotations outside of our institution is sufficient. So for us, we have a rotation, and then I would say 1 or 2 more. So 3 total max is kind of my advice to students. And I think it's for all the same reasons. And also I think you can take other electives that are related to PM&R and do a great job and get a great letter from somebody in like urology or rheumatology, or there's other specialties that are really closely related. And also it's a great opportunity to learn how different specialties view PM&R as well. So that's kind of what we tell our students.
Just to piggyback on Dr. Eckmeyer's point, I think she makes a great point on sort of other letters. I think a lot of people go and do Aways, sort of unspoken rules that people try to come back from Aways with letters of recommendation, whether it's from a program you directly like or to just broaden your application and bolster your application. And I think once you go past 1 or 2 Aways, that's almost too many letters to even submit. You might, you can only submit so many letters for an application anyway. So I think that's kind of like a good number. And letters from other specialties and from your more general medicine fields as well can also showcase, good work ethic and good care, no matter what you're doing, not just in physiatry.
In fact, I add to what you just said right now, not just letters, your other rotations, it actually spark a great story statement.
Okay. Eric, do you want to do the international students question?
Yeah. Sounds good. And I guess just one last thing too on that previous question,
Oh,
just
sure.
give a rough number kind of how many I applied to, for example. I think I applied around like 12 to 15 maybe max, but it's definitely a very personal decision. You know, I think it depends obviously on where you want to be geographically, your personal situation. And, you know, there's no really right or wrong answer, I think, in terms of how many to apply to. But yeah, so the next question is regarding international students. So it's a question in the chat. What if you're an international medical student with no access to VSLO? Are there opportunities via email, etc.? And one of the questions posed to us previously was kind of similar. What alternative options are there for international medical students to rotate without visas?
I can, oh, if no one has I can answer that. Every program is going to be different. So if you don't have access to VLSO or you can't get the insurance, that's like the malpractice part, that sometimes becomes a rate limiting step. You can do shadowing experiences, but you need to be very strategic and you need to be honest about the fact that you can apply through VLSO, but you are willing to do a shadowing experience. Now, when you want to do a shadowing experience, every institution is going to be different. So for us at Rush, we can allow you to be under volunteer services and you can simply shadow, but you can't touch a patient. You won't have computer access, nothing like that, but at least you're able to show your face. And so in that scenario, we might give you a day or two or a week. It just depends, that every institution is different. You want to be thoughtful and mindful that from July to about October, November, they may not allow shadowers because that's going to be reserved for audition students. So your prime time is probably May and June, just to get it in before the rush of students goes through. Now, if you are geographically located in the United States and you are an international student, you can also look at a residency program or even a rehab unit that's close to your house and just do volunteer work. Just state that, hey, I'll come in on Saturday and Sunday at this amazing institution, academic medical center. I will push patients around, whatever it might be, and people are going to see you. We had an amazing student that matched at University of Minnesota. And her name is Ternera Chumi. And she was a volunteer at Rush, spent so many months with us. We loved her. She got great letters of rec. She never did a formal rotation. And then she matched at such a great institution at University of Minnesota. So that story always touches my heart of how much hard work she did just by being in the Chicagoland area.
So I can add a little bit on to what Ravi said. Another resource which we don't think of a lot of times is physiatrists in private practice, who can also be available to give you observerships, or even a little beyond an observership. So when you're not like in a big institution, which is bound by a lot of rules and red tape, attendings can actually allow you to touch patients with the permission of patients, and all in their private practices, which actually I do allow. And I have to say, I've got a great success. Last year, I had a student, international student, who was with me for a rotation and actually has matched into Stanford this year. And not only that, I can personally say I was an international medical graduate. It was 25 years ago, but I did an observership at Montefiore, and it was way beyond interview season. It was in the end of December, but they were pretty impressed within 2 weeks of me being there that I not only got an interview at that time, I got an out of match position as well.
Okay. Why don't we move to the next question? I'm looking at them because we've answered some of this. Oh, this is a great question. I'm participating in couples match. Any advice for scheduling away rotations?
Couples matching is hard, as you know. So PM&R being as competitive as it is, and then, you know, putting a couples match into it is, it's challenging. Now, it does happen. I think it depends a little bit if both of you are doing PM&R or one of you is doing PM&R and one of you is doing a different specialty. I think the strategy for couples matching is probably larger cities that have multiple programs that both of you would be interested in, and really applying broadly, because the algorithm to get two matches together in the same city is challenging, but the more chances you give yourself, the better. So I think when I talk to students who are couples matching, we usually just look up all the programs for each specialty and try to play the numbers game. Because, you know, you might not end up at your first choice institution, but as long as you're in a similar city, that usually is a pretty successful couples match.
And sometimes also there's the issue of, you know, whether one person in the couples match is a stronger candidate than the other person. So then it becomes even more difficult about, you have to be flexible with the fact that you might not get your first three choices, and it might go down to even being lower than that. Even though the PM&R person might be the stronger candidate of the two. It all depends. Do you want to be together, or do you want to be in your only in the top institution that you want to go to? Sometimes we make compromises.
Residents, any thoughts?
I didn't do the couples match, so I don't think I have too much to add there.
Either did I. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be difficult, but I think you have to, you know, it's going to involve a little bit of compromise between both, but it's possible.
And I think, I'm just thinking because even in big cities, it's the number of spots for aways is small. So I think it might be hard for both you and your significant other to be doing an additional elective at the same institution. But strategically, if I were to look at it, I would say, hey, why don't you go to one institution? I'll go to another institution. And then they'll assume that we are similar in caliber. So if one of you does a good job, I'm sure it'll reflect positively on the other person. But I think that only works in a big city, but that's how couples match works. And so.
I will say when I was program director, like the couples match applicants usually reached out if their partner was not getting the audition rotation offers that they were hoping to. And there is a lot of back and forth and additional communication, usually from one program to the other, especially if it's at the same institution. So that is one, and everybody knows how stressful couples match is. So I think people are usually willing to reach out to, you know, if I'm in PM&R and internal medicine isn't getting back to their partner, you know, I was always usually willing to reach out, just because we know it's very challenging and you have to kind of over communicate.
Awesome. Eric, do you want to do the away rotation, how to pick where, that question?
Yeah. So our next question is doing rotations all over the states deemed negative rather than doing them all in one geographical area? Yeah, so I can try to tackle this. I definitely don't think it's necessarily deemed negative. Personally, I did away rotations kind of all over. Did one in Chicago, one in California. I guess at the time, I think the max was 2 that we were allowed to do. But no, I've certainly heard of students doing them all over and, you know, matching well. I think it just depends on what are your top programs, what your priorities are, you know, whether there's personal reasons you need to be in a geographic area or not. I think if you are trying to be in one geographical area in particular, I probably wouldn't recommend doing rotations all over the place. I mean, kind of obviously, but I think, you know, that could signal to program directors that maybe you are interested in, or you would kind of go wherever. But if you really want to stick in one area, I would probably try to do your ways around that area as well. But we can see what everyone else thinks as well.
Yeah, I agree with Eric. I think, if you have a location or geographical area that you are prefaced on, you should definitely apply to those, areas where they have PM&R away rotations. Just keep in mind, as everyone was talking about before, the amount that you do. I feel like a lot of people don't talk about the cost of, going to these away rotations. Most of the time, you're probably paying rent for your place at your home as well as somewhere else. So those are things to consider. And then also transportation and, food, all these sort of things that can also be a hindrance. So,
It's no,
yeah, that's all I really have to say about that.
I also think in all of this, it's also important to remember that these away rotations are also equally for you. So if there's somewhere, across the country from your medical school or even your hometown that has a program that you think you may be interested in going to and committing, 3, possibly 4 years if it's categorical of your life living in that area, using that away rotation opportunity to get a feel for the program as well as the environment to see if that's really something you would like before, it gets into interview season and having to do your rank list. So kind of strategically planning your ways that way to also kind of really determine what are your top programs and do you see yourself as a fit, especially if it's somewhere that's further away that you haven't had much exposure to.
Yeah, just echoing what Rachel said. I think me and a lot of other my friends who apply for away rotations kind of used away rotations to kind of like an experimental way of seeing taking into consideration places I would have never considered. Like one of my friends did one in California, and he went to Rutgers for everything. And he ended up really loving it and basically geographic preference because of the way rotation and matching into a California program. So definitely was something that he didn't expect to do. So definitely a good way of experimenting and kind of testing the waters of where you might want to go for the next 4 years of your life.
All right, thank you. So now the last half will be just talking about what to do during the away electives. So residents and attendings, I think there's a bunch of questions on the chat. We're going to try to get to them, but if you have an opportunity to answer them via the chat, that'd be awesome. The first question for the attendings is, what is the best way to prepare for the elective to make a good impression? Any suggestions on resources or any materials to read?
So I think I already mentioned it before, but I actually tell all my students to do their rotation, their home rotation first, so that they are more equipped going away on their away rotation. As well as we have a list of other electives that they could do either in the end of their 3rd year or the beginning of their 4th year, so they'd be better prepared when they go for their PM&R rotation, like already having a neurology rotation or orthopedics or sports medicine before they actually go. I don't think specifically, I personally feel that you should not specifically read about PM&R before going. You have to get your basic knowledge about anatomy, musculoskeletal stuff more in place when you go. And then follow the cue that is given to you by the people that you're rotating with and read up more on that. But people will see whether you have a basic knowledge or not. And attendings are very good at figuring that out with just maybe 1 or 2 conversations.
Yeah, I would second that. I think brush up on your neuro and your musculoskeletal anatomy first. Because that's the easiest and best question, honestly, to ask a medical student, to really gauge their general knowledge is anatomy. Because everybody learns anatomy, it's just, do you remember it? So brush up on that. If you go to an EMG clinic, read about the brachial plexus before you show up, stuff like that, And then in addition to just basic anatomy, I think having reviewed your neurologic and your musculoskeletal physical exam skills is a really great way to, to shine, to look good, If you can, you know, perform an exam or ask an intelligent question about a physical exam, or you see an attending do an exam and you're like, oh, I've noticed you did this procedure. Is that for whatever it is? So, I mean, I think really it's less about knowing medical knowledge about PM&R and more about kind of shoring up your foundational knowledge of neuro and musculoskeletal.
My thoughts are definitely important to review those resources, but what I would, you know, ensure you know that it's about the growth that you can show during the rotation. So, you know, you may not know what the specific location, meaning what unit you're going to be on, but if you can demonstrate from day 1 to day 30 that you are someone that can be taught very easily and you're fun to be around, that's going to go a long way. You know, students are always so focused on results because that's all it is, pass this test, pass that test. But those that have a good process for learning are those that are going to be successful no matter what environment they are in, because they're going to know I'm on a spinal cord unit. Well, then, all right, let me grab the book because I know they're talking about the Asia exam. Let me read this and retain this because I know the process that works for me to learn. And so I'd really focus on ensuring you know how you best learn. So when you're in a tough environment, like an audition elective, you can learn things as quickly as possible, and you have all the tricks to keep yourself prepared for anything that may come to you. But once again, anatomy, neuroanatomy, physical exam, definitely know that. So.
Also, just as a resident, I think one of my favorite things when we do have visiting students is when they do come with questions. It's less fun for us if you come in knowing everything. So actually having those questions and being engaged is far more exciting for us. We went into PM&R, we love PM&R, we love talking about PM&R. So anytime a student comes with a thoughtful question and an opportunity, when appropriate, to have a small lecture or have a small discussion about a topic, whether, it's the Asia exam or electrodiagnostic principles. That's also kind of really nice and engaging for us, especially on a resident level. And then going back a little bit to what Dr. Eckmeyer was saying, really taking that opportunity of, as things come up and as you're seeing different pathologies throughout your rotations, going home, reading up a little bit more on kind of what was seen that day, to then come back with insightful questions, really just kind of take it to the next level of showing your engagement, enthusiasm, and kind of commitment to getting the most out of the rotation.
All right. Dr. Theratel, do you have something to say? No, okay. So, yeah, so I think a nice segue question from that is, how can a student shine on an away rotation or stand out? I think I can offer a few things here. So I think the first thing that comes to mind for me here is really just knowing your patients. And I know you probably hear that a lot on rotations, but you know, for me now as a PGY2, having worked with medical students, I think that's like the first and foremost kind of baseline thing that you can do. And I remember one instance that stood out to me was basically like one of our residents was post call. They just had a 24-hour call, and they told me on sign out, oh, like if you have a question about this patient, just ask the medical student. She knows this patient really well. And that was kind of like burned in my brain, like, wow, that is just not even impressive, just like a helpful part of the team. And, you know, that obviously helps my day, helps the whole team. And so I think that really stands out. And it's not like you need to know, you know, everything that the resident knows, but just if you have like a good grasp of, you know, their history, what happened to them before they came to the hospital, what's gone on here, and just kind of following them, even in the physical therapy gym. You know, I think being proactive, like that's something that can be overlooked. But, you know, if you just say, oh, hey, you know, I have some downtime, do you mind if I just go see them in the therapy gym? Like, I think that those kind of things go a long way. And maybe the next day on rounds, you can say, oh, I actually saw him in the gym yesterday and his mobility was actually a lot improved in the right shoulder or something. And those things can actually help a lot, because us as residents, you know, we don't have as much time to kind of see some of those more nitty gritty details. So I think that's kind of one of like the nuts and bolts of one way to shine. I think other sort of extra things that I got advice on to do that I think is a really nice way to kind of go about it is looking at kind of just local events, you know, volunteering, things like that. So whether it's like adaptive events that are going on through the residency program while you're there. I know like here at Sinai, we have like a volunteer clinic a few Saturdays, you know, a month. And so just going to those kind of extra things or things on the side can really go a long way. And I think also just is interesting for yourself. And then lastly, I'll keep it brief, but if you see an interesting patient, I think another cool thing to do is like writing up a case report. So residents are always happy to hop on that with you, help kind of guide you through the case a little bit. yeah, it's a really concrete way to work with the resident to kind of showcase your knowledge a little bit and do more of a deeper dive into something you found interesting.
I'll take some low-hanging fruit. I think two things that aren't spoken about a lot in like conversations like this, but are absolutely go such a long way, is both professionalism and empathy. Two features that I think no one will tell you outwardly, you need to do this. But I think if you can showcase that on a short rotation, whether it's a week to 4 weeks, that can go a long way, almost more than anything, because timeliness, showing that you care about the patient, that you want to talk to their family members, their family members, the therapist that they like, those sort of things, really kind of like piggybacking off of Eric's point. That's what really shows a lot of value when maybe the resident's not there, the attending's not there. You can show that you're still a valuable member of the team, not only through competency, but just for the fact that you care. You care about being there and you care about taking care of these patients. Ultimately, if you're going to join that residency for 3-4 years, showing that you care is probably one of the most important features that anyone can really get as an impression out of you on it away.
I can't agree more on something like that, because we end up making all these rotations be that this is something that we want to shine at. We want to show people how good we are. But at the end of the day, you have to also remember these rotations are what show what you are as a person. And that is something you cannot hide from anyone. So I have to tell you, over my past 20 plus years as an attending, the number of times family members and patients have come up to me and told me good things about the medical students who are doing the rotation, stuff that they've done when I have not been around, when no staff has been around to see anything. But it was just because they were a good person, a good medical student who really wanted to learn and be empathetic to the patient and their family members and did stuff. I mean, there is no higher recommendation than if a family member or the patient tells you, hey, doc, he's really good, or she is really good. You should really hire them for a job.
Just touch a little bit too on that kind of professionalism aspect. While again, these away rotations are equally for you, you are also essentially interviewing for an extended period of time. So things like, I know again, low hanging fruit, but showing up not just on time, but early, and really kind of taking the opportunity to see what life is like as a resident in that program. Kind of being there kind of through the whole day, including the late admission that comes in, right before the end of the day, seeing that through, continuing to be engaged and enthusiastic, as well as really just being mindful of, I guess, everyone you come in contact with. Yes, it may be the attending who's going to ultimately write you the letter, but the feedback from the residents, ancillary staff, members of the team can also go a very long way. So just making sure that, again, you are being watched the entire time, and really making sure you're putting your best foot forward while, as everyone has said, kind of being true to yourself and letting that shine through.
Awesome. Eric, I think we covered a lot of different ones. Which question should we do next?
Yeah. I think a good one is, how many patients should a student be expected to carry? I think it's a relatively simple one.
So Eric said, so how many, when they're on an inpatient rotation, or if they're in clinic, how many patients should they be expected to carry or see? What is a way to stand out, but also not be overbearing?
I think the simplest answer is just to ask. I think there's a lot of unwritten rules in medicine, and that's not great. That's not a good culture that we should probably change. So it should be clear, right? You should come in and somebody should tell you, whether it's attending or the resident, we want medical students to follow this many patients. But if nobody says that, I would ask. I would just ask, what are your expectations of me this week? How many patients do you think I should take? And then whatever they say, believe them at their word. I mean, you don't have to take the whole service unless somebody says, hey, Dr. So-and-so really likes it when the medical students take care of all the patients. That's weird, though. You should question that. I would question that. I would question if it's just a resident who doesn't want to do their work. But I really do think you need to ask. It's not something that you're just gonna intuitively know, and I would pay attention to how that information is delivered too. I mean, I think you want to end up at a program that respects you as a person, and gives you a reasonable workload, so.
Yeah, I agree with that. When I was in medical school, I was taught as a third year, you carry 1 to 3 patients as a third year. And then as you get to a fourth year, you carry about 3 to 5 patients. Carrying 3 to 5 patients, it may be harder for some people, may be easier, but I think the most important thing is that if you have 3 patients, do you know them so well that you can present them to anyone, anyone walking across the street or, anyone in the hospital, and you can, manage them properly. So I think, number is not the biggest thing. I think, you doing an efficient job with the amount you have looks way better than anything else.
All right. We can move on to our next question. What are some common mistakes that you see students make on their away rotations that we should avoid?
I think one that is never like it just sticks out when it happens, but no one really thinks too much about it, is just not being present enough. If you're there for the rotation, I think it's important to make yourself as present as possible for the team. So if you are in a situation where no one's like, parenting you the entire time, telling you, oh, follow me here, follow me here. A lot of times these attendings, these residents are really busy. They're going at their own pace. And you're kind of there to just do what you can, get involved with what you can, making sure you're present for as much of the rounds, the care, the therapy, the outpatient visits, the admissions. Just being present is important. You don't want to be that medical student where people look around and just be like, oh, where are they? I think it's one thing to think about in that short away that you have, is being present and trying to make your presence felt, in the sense of that you want to be around the team, you want to be around the care for the patient.
I think one mistake I've seen was follow through. I think as away students, you really want to make a good impression and kind of take as much on, whether it's like writing case reports or taking more patients on, or staying after hours. But saying one thing and then not doing it, I think looks worse than doing what you're already doing. So I think if following through is like a big thing. So if you're going to say you're going to do something, definitely you should follow through with it as well.
I also think trying to have situational awareness is really important. Of course, everyone wants you to be engaged and ask questions, but knowing kind of the appropriate times and when to do that. If you're running behind on rounds and everyone's running to a meeting, may not be the best time to be like, oh, can we go through the INSCE exam and the different components, but saving that question and making sure it's discussed later when there is a moment of downtime, or almost requesting, can we sit down and talk about this at XYZ time, I think is really important and shows your enthusiasm and your engagement without kind of distracting from the moment if there's something more pressing happening at that time.
Yeah, I think one thing that Saron kind of touched on was, if there's a moment where not much is going on for you as a student, like, the rounds are done and you don't have much to do, I don't think that's necessarily a time for you to, kind of just relax. I think being proactive, even if the whole team is really busy and you don't have any tasks to do, like that shows a lot and goes a long way. So whether that is shadowing in therapy, or even saying, hey, I was looking into this thing with this one patient, like, do you mind if I go check on him for this task? Just, instead of saying like, is there anything I can help with, more being like, I noticed this thing, can I go help with it? So I know it's a little bit easier or harder said than done, but just being proactive goes a long way.
I think one thing I would just keep in mind too, that as you're hopefully going to have 1 or 2 addition, and you're from one school, and your network in PM&R will continue to grow. I think just remember that we are still a fairly small specialty, and so one mistake I have seen a couple times is with visiting students is just kind of being a little bit negative about either their home program or a program that they just rotated at, and and sharing some of those feelings. I think that you can have those feelings, but I don't think your audition rotation is necessarily a good place to share negative feelings about other programs, because I think we know a lot of people at other programs too. So you just want to be a little bit professional and thoughtful as you experience different programs.
Okay, awesome answers. I've got a good one for everybody. This is not my question, someone else had it, posed it. It says, how do you suggest navigating if a resident or attending says you can go home early for the day, but you're on an away elective and you want to make a good impression, but you also don't want to be annoying? So what is the best approach to this?
I say if they say you go home, you go home. Sometimes being overbearing is actually, not the best thing. I feel that if all the work is complete and you've done your task, you can go home. If they say you can go home, it's not a bad thing to leave early. Some days you're going to stay late. Some days you're going to leave early. It just depends on the situation. So.
I also think this is an excellent opportunity, to Eric's point earlier about, okay, well, if our work is done for the day, can I go shadow in the gym if there's still therapy or things going on, to learn a little bit more what the therapists are doing kind of day to day. Also, if you are dismissed early, if there was an interesting case or an interesting topic that was brought up on the day, again, using that time to kind of read up on it and say, okay, can I, then talk to you guys tomorrow about what I read up on last night or something like that.
I would echo what everyone else said. I mean, I think you really need to center yourself on how much work you actually did that day. So if you had your 4 patients, you saw them, you did all the work, the resident says, fantastic job, you're the best, thank you. They say, go home. They're probably rewarding you, or they're just saying like everything is done, or the resident themselves might be stressed and they just want to get their work done. So you can kind of read the room, and some residents just might be stressed for a week, and that just, it is what it is. You can do simple things like I love what one of the residents had mentioned about going to see the patient in the therapy gym. If you really want to shine in a certain way, if they have a library, just be like, cool, I'm going to be in the library until about 5 o'clock. If you need anything, just text me. I'll come back and I'll help you out. Or if hey, I know you're getting a late admission at 6 o'clock. I'm going to be in the library anyways. So just call me if you'd like me to come by. Don't just show up, because if they're sending you home, there's probably a good reason for it. If they're sending you home every day, may be a sign that there's something you can improve upon, but that's very, very, very rare.
Looks like we have like 7 more minutes here. So another question, what can a student do to help the team that a resident or attending may not be able to do or have as much time to do? I think this is actually a really good question. Because as students, sometimes it does feel like maybe you're unclear of your role on the team. But, and I think now being on the other side of it as a resident, there are definitely things that the students can help with and be a legitimately helpful part of the team. So yeah, some things that just come to mind off the top of my head would be some of the more like clerical tasks can be really helpful. So whether that's like calling pharmacies, calling for follow-up appointments, stuff like that. It kind of depends on the residency program if that's a task that needs to be done. But that's certainly helpful, just for my day-to-day personally. Another thing I think is like talking with families. And as a medical student, I think, you kind of have the luxury of time. And so that's a nice opportunity to obviously get to know the patient and the family better. And kind of like Dr. Therichel was saying, the family can also speak to you, to the team, and say, oh, so-and-so is such a great medical student. So I think some of these smaller things that you kind of pick up on that are taking some residents' time, just offering to do those things throughout the day.
Yeah, Eric brings up those 2 points alone are so important. I think when you guys do your ways and eventually as residents, the discharge plan and making a good discharge plan that the family agrees on, that is timely, the medical student can help so much with reaching out to pharmacy, make sure the medications are there, make sure the medications are approved, make sure that all supplies and devices are getting where they need to be at the correct site, whether that's a facility or to home, who's going to be home, calling family, checking in on that. These are invaluable aspects of the care when you have a list of 10, 15, 20 patients at times. You have to do that for everyone. It's so helpful.
I think too, when you're in like ambulatory clinics, sometimes there's not always a resident there, but there's usually some busy like clinic staff, like nurses or MAs. And something that I've seen be helpful is, you know, like helping the nursing staff get like an injection ready, right? Like learning how to draw up Botox or learning how to draw up a steroid injection, or how do we set up an EMG machine, or, you know, just kind of getting some of that stuff ready. You'll learn because you should learn how to do it anyway, but it will really to help your attending and your clinic staff too, and they'll be very appreciative to keep the clinic flowing smoothly. So I think that has been, I think, really helpful. And I honestly think the students have really enjoyed learning how to do some of those things because really, you know, as the attending, you know how to do it all, but you also have a smooth flow with your clinic staff. But as a student, you still have to learn some of those basic skills. So.
And just reinforcing again, something that the residents were saying before, on the inpatient side, because that's what I do, we do spend a lot of time reading up records which came from the previous hospital that the patient's coming from. And many times when you're doing the admission, you might be under stress. There are 5 or 6 patients. You might not get to read everything. But if you have a medical student on your service, it is actually a good thing if the med student can go over that and look at things which could have got missed, like say appointments which were written out from other hospitals that the patient needs to follow up with when they go from here. Medications which might have been omitted in one place or the other. One thing I loved that one of my medical students did during one of their rotations was actually sit with the patients who were going to go home, or even before, make little pocket cards for them with all their medications written on it, which they could either put in their pocket or in their wallet, so they could have it all the time available. Because being in hospitals is definitely, as you would have seen by now, not a comforting thing for a patient. It's very confusing. They get all kinds of different opinions and information from people. So if you can make that better for them and go over that with the patient, which the residents and the attendings might not have all the time in the world to do, that would be a great thing.
Awesome. I think we're getting close to time. So just to avoid us doing a partial question, I thought this might be a good way to wrap up. I want to thank everyone for making it to our Road to Residency program today. Thank you to all the speakers. We can never do it without you. All of the questions that people had posed in the chat, I hope we were able to answer them, but Amy will be putting together a document with those questions and some of the other questions that we've had from previous years. So all those questions will be answered. There is going to be part 2, 3, and 4. That's going to be timely based off of where you're on the application process. We're going to be using the AAP Twitter account to ask you all what questions you want answered. So please be active on Twitter, or X, formerly known as Twitter, and we'll be happy to answer those questions. And thank you again to Amy for taking time out of her day to also put this together. So thank you all.